Hello and welcome back to part 2 of the rubric review. I want to make sure I gave you a good overview and understanding of what is expected so that there won't be any problems. Everyone in this class except one person is using APA, so please keep that in mind. And double check your papers and make sure that you haven't had points counted off in the past for this. Here we go. So the introduction, and this, your score in here is multiplied by 2 when I'm finished grading it. So this is in reality worth 40 points on this section. It's just the way that it's done so that everything is broken down as I'm showing it to you. So it will be multiplied by 2 in the end once the points are taken off. So on the introduction, one of the problems that sometimes happens is that students who are really passionate about their topic might exceed 1 or 2 paragraphs. Now this is a longer paper, so I allowed for a little bit more to be added in, but I did limit that, so it should not exceed 2 full paragraphs, and a paragraph in this class has to be at least 5 sentences to be developed. That's not on here, but it is an expectation, and I've said it in this video again. I've seen some pretty underdeveloped paragraphs on some isolated essays. For the most part, everyone's developing those quite nicely, so please make sure they're developed. On this, it gives you instructions on what you need in your thesis statement. I'm actually going to post some help with that in case you're still struggling, which most of you shouldn't be. You should have done the proposal and have everything pretty much in place. So up here what you're seeing is the descriptive and appropriate title. Now you can have argument paper on it, but you also need an appropriate title with it, or you can name it something totally different. It really should be unique to your topic, short and concise. So something that represents what you're going to discuss. An opening that gets the reader's attention. Now that's done usually with a hook. That can be a statistic, a quote, just an interesting fact, a part of a case study, just whatever you think is appropriate for that. And of course you want to do an in-text citation for anything that you add in there. The clear thesis statement includes a counter argument, a position, and a minimum of 3 points to discuss and a maximum of 5. So please keep that in mind as well. It also defines any needed terms. So again, you want to communicate to your audience what some of those terms are that we might not necessarily understand. Make sure the paragraph's well developed. You cannot exceed a full page on this, and really that is too long, but I'm allowing 2 full paragraphs if needed. It is not necessary, but you do have to have at least 1 full paragraph. Quotes should be a minimum here. You're going to use mostly paraphrasing throughout this paper. When you do quote, you do need a page number in APA. And most of your APA, so that's why I mention it. And then you're only going to use third person only in this paper. So here's the body again. That's going to be multiplied by 2, so it's really important that you really pay attention to all of this information. Here's again the 3 supporting points. You're going to discuss those in the order that they are in your thesis statement. Now the exception to that is that you can flip-flop your counter argument. It could either be at the beginning or the end, but the points need to be in order. The literature on the topic needs to be integrated into the discussion. You will not be allowed to repeat titles over and over to lengthen your paper. Proper etiquette says you use the last name of authors, and actually there's a certain rhythm to those that you may have to look up when you're mentioning author more than once. There's a different way to do that. But for the most part, you're only mentioning the last names of authors, and even that should not be repeated over and over. You should be using those in-text citations to show where you're getting information from. Each paragraph focuses on a supporting point. Now you may have one point of your, and you should, one point of your essay may span 3 or 4 paragraphs. So just make sure that your transitions between those paragraphs is logical when you're doing that. The headers I do expect headers in this so that it keeps you straight in terms of knowing which point you're discussing and staying on track. Now those headers, I do have limitations on those so that they don't cause trouble with word count. So make sure that you're only using 1 to 3 words. And so your introduction will only have your title at the page, at the top of page 2 if you're APA. And then your introduction will not have an introduction header. That is not used in APA because it's assumed that you're introducing your topic. Then when you go to your first point, you can name it something logical that represents it. And it really should only be 1 to 3 words. So then you go to your second point once you get down there and use one more header, and your third point, one more header that's 1 to 3 words, and then your counter argument, name it something logical. You can put counter argument and then colon and another word if you'd like to keep yourself straight as well. Then you can actually use one for conclusion if that keeps you straight, but that's the only extra that's allowed that's not mentioned here. Organization has to be appropriate for the topic. Synthesis is present, and that's really integrating those sources, showing where those are coming from, and making sure that you're avoiding any type of opinions of your own, and that it's just very clear where all of that support for your topic is coming from. There's no freestanding quotes or block quotes. That's super important. You're really going to keep this to a minimum, and I do take off points in this section as well as the formatting section for using too many quotes. Block quotes are long quotes. You shouldn't have any of those at all. Anytime that you want to take out a partial of a quote and use that, you can look up how to use the ellipse. If you're taking out like the end of a sentence that you want to quote, you would do the quote and then dot, 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 and then write the rest of the sentence and then, the quote and then your in-text citation, then a period. So you can do those like that to shorten how many quotes you're using if you'd like. The conclusion, it restates or revisits the thesis. I've already talked about the solution or call to action in video 1. So if you need some more ideas on that, please listen to the first part of these videos. It also needs to provide a meaningful closure. So there shouldn't be something hanging out there that we need to know. Just logically closing out that conclusion. Remember, this one can only be 1 paragraph, and I may go ahead and add that in and upload it, but just know it should only be 1 paragraph or so, unless your call to action or your what you're going to do as a solution is involved, and even then it shouldn't exceed 2. I put at least 1 developed paragraph, so 2 is really the limit here as well. Formatting and resources, this is super important. I can't stress that enough. In research, your in-text citations are huge. That shows that it's not you talking about it, that you're actually using the experts, the credible sources to support your research. So you really have to get friendly with those type of that type of documentation. And I did provide APA links and an MLA link on the assignment. As I said, there's only one person who's used an MLA, so make sure you're using the correct format. And please avoid any pretty things on your paper. That is not APA or MLA. And I know it's beautiful and I even like it, but I have to hold you to a standard. So please avoid, blue and yellow colors and adding in things in the header. It will be counted off for. So make sure that your type is set up in the correct format. That's Times New Roman 12 font. You're double spaced with no extra spaces. Actually, the way to decide is you can go up here to this little up and down arrow, and if one of these says remove space, either one of those, you need to click it and it will remove any extra space that you see between lines. And of course you would be set on 2.0 on yours. So keep that in mind. The appropriate documentation information is used. There is a really hefty penalty for not using that on this one. Sometimes, as I said before, our papers are audited to make sure that we're teaching students the correct way to do things. And if you do not use in-text citation, it could cost you half of your grade. There is no way for me to tell where you're getting information if you're not using the proper citations. So please look up on the APA link that I showed you that you saw in the assignment information, to see how to do those. They're so important. So when you paraphrase something, you're going to have the author's name and the year, and there's a comma set off between those. And of course, that's only when you have one author. There's a special way to do it if you have more than that. If you have a quote, though, you do have to have a page number for a document, and that would be P period, and then space and your page number. If it's a series of pages, you put the series there. And the period always goes after the in-text citation, not before. Also, on the quotes, if you got that off a website and you don't have page numbers, that's when you use PARA, paragraph, PARA period, and the page number in APA. So I just want to let you know that, so you can keep an eye on those things and you'll recognize them hopefully when you see that you've maybe overlooked something. Appropriate references on the references page have to be there as well. They need to be in alphabetical order. The reference page, or in the case of our MLA student, the works cited page, has to be on a separate page from your text. It'll be on the first line, so works cited or references will be on that first line of the next page after your text, and you will alphabetize all of your sources and format those correctly. So at least 6 sources are used. I've already said that, and no more than 10. 4 of the sources must be peer-reviewed, and you must have 3 different types, which I talked about in the other video. Quotes, again, this is where it's counted off again. It's so important to minimize those and to use your own words to try to communicate what you're talking about. Remember, these are doubled categories, so they will be doubled. Once I count off the score here, anything that you have, like say you have 18 out of 20, 18 will be doubled in this and added to the total score. And then no spelling errors gets a perfect score here. I'll be honest, if you have 1 or 2, it's not going to really break the bank. But if there's a continued issue, those will be, you will miss those points. And remember, this is actually worth 40 because it's multiplied by 2 at the end. So please keep that in mind. There are no grammar errors that distract the reader. Now that I do count off for, because if it's big enough to distract the reader, it's probably a problem. No punctuation errors that distract the reader, the same thing here. And then appropriate word choice and tone is important too. You really want the tone to be quite professional. Leave out contractions like can't and won't and shouldn't and all of those, and that sort of soups that up to a different level. That can help with that. And also just avoiding things like slang phrases, or I can't think of one right now. There was one that somebody used in one of the papers that just sort of it sounded like something you would say sitting around with your friends. So if it sounds that way, it probably doesn't belong in here. So just make sure that you're using a professional tone. You're using the correct words. You know, there's there, and there. Those are 3 different types of words. You know, just be mindful of affect and affect. Those are 2 different words as well. So just make sure you're double checking. And the biggest thing is that, of course, read it out loud when you finish. That really helps because our brains kick in and they go, hey, that didn't sound right. But when you read it to yourself, you really read it the way that you think it is supposed to be. Many times we overlook things that way. But also, don't be afraid to run a spell and grammar check in Word. To do that, if you just click review and you go over to grammar and spelling, it's going to do that for you. The worst thing in the world is for me to open a paper and see a lot of squiggly lines, blue and red, and all kinds of problems. That's the first thing I do is open your paper to see if it is formatted correctly, and that you did a spelling and grammar check. So that's something very simple that can help you catch some of those problems. I hope that you found this video helpful. Please don't hesitate to contact me. You can see the syllabus for my contact information. If you call my phone, please text the message and I'll get back to you as soon as I'm not in class. But I will get back to you. So thank you so much and have a good day. Bye-bye.